Tri-State Freethinkers podcast lecture series from April 6, 2016, Cults, with speaker Kate Ashcraft, the Bluegrass Skeptic.
So this evening we're going to have just a brief look into cults. Most notably, people know cults when they're thinking about, Jonestown, David Koresh, Heaven's Gate, you name it. There's all kinds of weirdos and wackos out there, and they're fun sometimes. If you like to look at humanity under a microscope and try to figure out what's going on in that brain, that's probably part of my fascination with it, because I also like mythology a lot. And mythology's got a lot of cultish kind of things associated with it too, with the way people like it and whatnot. So let me see. Oh, I got a screen there. Wow, I feel special. It's like you knew. So let's start off with the precursors to establishing a religion. And I'm of that view, some won't always agree with me on this. I think when you're starting a religion, even the 12, 14 major religions of the world, Shinto, Christianity, Islam, all of those guys, Zoroastrianism, they had to start somewhere. They had to be in some type of a world American Idol contest to win that big ticket, get money behind them and people behind them to become popular and help take over a lot of our cultures that we see today. And then you have cults. And it, to me, seems like they didn't quite win the audition, if you know what I mean. They just, no. But they still tried to pursue it as a side job anyway when they should have stuck to their day job. So that, to me, is how I kind of see cults. But the question is, what is a cult? Why would you want to join one? I know, I hear Christians all the time ask me about atheism being a cult. Why would you join that? They do, they perceive us like that sometimes. And it's like, I don't even know where they get that from. But I guess it's because we show a passion that they don't even recognize in themselves for a particular type, well, in our case, lack of belief or social structure that we want. They don't get it. We'll do a brief overview of a few cults because, I'm going to keep it kind of quick. If we have time, I'll go into how to escape a cult because it's not as easy as running away and all that good stuff. So, do I have this facing the right way? Yeah. So, first and foremost, let's get that definition under control. What is a cult? And really, it is simply what the Oxford Dictionary describes it as, a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. And that sounds very vague, doesn't it? Because we see all this, we've got Scientology and Heaven's Gate, Manson, Father Yod. I don't know if many people know much about the family of the 60s and 70s. He was kind of a rock and roll cult. Very lucky guy from what I hear. And then, of course, yeah, if you know Father Yod. We got all these, the Templars and all of that. And that's, the Templars down there, they're actually a Mexican drug cult. They do sacrificial ritualistic killings to this day, routinely. They have a problem in Mexico right now with it. So you're thinking, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. But they also are known to have a relatively small group of people that have religious beliefs or practices that others will see as strange and sinister. Well, we kind of see some things that Catholics might do or Christians or, I know Islam is really getting beat up right now because they have some not very nice members out there who are doing things that are horrible. And so people try to look at it like, oh. And then you have a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. Oh, sorry. So anyway, it sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it? It really does. How does religion and Christianity and all of these other major establishments differentiate from a cult? Let's do a little disclaimer first. Cult is actually an outdated term. If you talk to people who work for the FBI, psychologists and whatnot, they really are not going to refer to it as a cult any longer. Simply because it's a pejorative, especially in American culture. In Europe, whether it's Christianity or the Manson family, it's a religion. They might refer to these nastier ones like the Manson family as extremists. They might use a different verbiage, but they're still looked at as a religion. Whereas our culture, we just use it as a negative connotation. So if you look at how the term came about, it started a while back in the 17th century, and it was just to denote worship and ceremony, which, okay, sure, why not? Well, upcoming Christianity and political rule and government like that was influenced by Christianity and whatnot, it was really Christianity that said, whoa, we don't like this term. This isn't good, because we could fall under this. We need to put something else on here because we don't want to just be thrown into this idea that we're part of a deviant religious group, that we're coming from outside of what's the norm. Because they had all these splinter groups that were trying to say they were Christian too. We see this happen to this day with the Mormons and Christianity. They're blackballed all the time. They really are, just because they have different familial values, and where they got their information about God is different than your normal Protestant. So this is where these playing on words came in, and it started to evolve. But what it comes down to, if you really wanted to tell the difference between a cult or an extremist religion or a fringe religion versus established religions like Christianity and whatnot, it's the popularity, for one. Okay? And this is a popularity that's just going to go away after 10 years like the Moonies or something. Okay? It's going to stay around for generations. It infiltrates your government. It infiltrates everywhere. Okay? So yeah, it really does matter. And the veracity behind these beliefs, or at least not necessarily whether they're true or not, but how steep they are in the culture and society that you live in. That determines a lot of it as well. Along with the fact, it's just being recognized. If you get political influence, you're being recognized. You're getting what you need to establish yourself to winning that religious American Idol ticket. And finally, of course, it's money. We saw how quickly with Scientology, it came up from the 50s. We saw the evolution of religion. Whoosh. People go, oh no, it's a cult. Okay, whatever. But yeah, it's fueled by money. I won't argue about that. But so is the Christianity, so is all these other religions. Okay? You got to see how it happened. And that's how they got the influence they have today. Money was a big, huge factor. And then they were able to get political influence. You see what they do over here in the States with Hollywood, and they have a lot of influence on our government as well. So, why do we want to join a cult? Because when you're looking at this, when you see it, how diverse they are. I mean, you're just like, what is this I'm looking at? This was actually a propaganda video put out after 9/11. Oh shoot, I didn't write the cult's name down. I'm pretty sure this was the family as well, before they went and changed up. They literally did this. It's a film. This is just a still. But they did hardcore porn along with the trade show footage, or the trade billing footage. They ran that to try and show how they don't agree with society's choices and all this and that. They used that, So when you're seeing things like this, you're like, why on earth would you join something like this? What's the motivation? And really, when you look at it, you kind of see several themes running through the phenomenon that is cultism. And it's very, very fundamental human needs. It's identity, discipline, knowledge, and power. And these are very, very basic human needs. We all need to have a sense of being. We all need that discipline. We do need discipline, not like in the conventional sense of being spanked or something, but we need to have boundaries. We need that control to some level. We'd like to know that we have knowledge, that we are knowledgeable about things going on around us, and we want that knowledge affirmed. And then on top of that, it's power. And that power isn't necessarily like you're controlling people like Father Yod here, okay? Not necessarily like that. It's the power of knowing that you know something they don't, that you've got an edge, that you have some control, okay, that you have influence. So let's talk about that knowledge. Knowledge in cults, it's almost always something that you can't find in everyday school. It's usually something of, they like to use truths. Oh, we've realized this truth. I think I was hearing about a binaural heartbeat of the earth the other day from somebody. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And they were sold on this 100%. That's what they had because it was metaphysical type of science, And what's sad is that a lot of these truths are presented as like a profound and mysterious thing that you need to figure out. So you're pursuing it and pursuing it. And usually they'll verify what they think is true because the regular school of thought proves false against what they're saying is true, like in their own manipulative way of explaining these lessons and understandings of the world around you. You see that sometimes, I don't know, like with flat earthers, even hollow earthers. I don't know how many of you are familiar with hollow earthers. Yeah. I used to love the stories because we all saw the sci-fi movies. I thought that was cool. I never believed it, though. But there's some people that really believe that inside the earth it's hollow and there's a whole other universe inside our earth. They believe it. Okay? You'll see all of these kind of things. And they feel like they've accomplished something because their belief alone is defying the norm. It's like a counterculture kind of deal. And so they feel like they know something, no matter how ill-founded it might be, because it's an easier concept that they can prove with vague proofs, details, you know, emotional arguments, appeals to authority kind of thing, and whatnot. And when you have knowledge, the next step is usually power. And I really wanted to show ISIL in this case, because this is a very, very good example of what happens. This is what I would consider, quote unquote, a cult, because this is not the norm. This is obviously a political and abuse of power for other types of gain. People cannot leave, and the people that do and are in it, they feel empowered. They feel like they know something someone doesn't. They have a cause to fight for, no matter how disillusioned that we all realize it is from the outside looking in. This is what power can do in large numbers with money and political, influence. And then you get identity. A lot of us in this world, I know I myself, I didn't really start to discover who I was until the end of my second marriage. I let everyone around me define who I was, because I really did not know how to figure out who I was, what I liked, what I wanted to do with my free time. What did I want to do when I grow up? And I was already grown up. Freemasons, they offer this kind of thing. You get an identity. You become part of a family, okay? And it's not just the Freemasons that does this. They also have the Eastern Star, I think is the women's group for it, and they do great things. So I'm not even knocking them here. This is just the basics, okay? They offer you an identity. They make you somebody, okay? And ultimately, you get the purpose of life. They give you a purpose to work towards. Like, with the Raelians. I love the Raelians. They're hilarious. If you're unfamiliar with the Raelians, maybe we'll have an episode where we can do UFOs and whatnot, because it's so funny. I love it. And you can just smash it to bits with simple thought. But some folks really don't want to say it's a god, but they like the idea of something bigger than us brought us here. And Raelians go even further than that. It's just hilarious. And these people really do. They give you a purpose to strive for. And they are 1,000% into it. And they're still active today. They're actually pretty predominant out west. It's a really interesting culture. So when you're looking at all of this, and the identity and everything else, you think, well, we're seeing Raelians, we're seeing Freemasons. How harmful can these people really be? Look at this kid. He's just wearing, specially made goggles and that for an aviator. This is the cargo cults of Vanuatu. This is over in the New Hebrides Islands, over in the South Pacific. It's not too far away from Australia. They exist today. They even have holidays still. And these folks are really interesting because I don't know how many are familiar with cargo cults, but a lot of folks hear about cargo cults and they think, well, they worship the planes. And it's not really so much that. There's a larger story behind why they worship not the planes, but the purpose of these planes and what they represent. And for the cargo cults of Vanuatu, the biggest thing for them is they want to reclaim their natural culture, and they want restitution for what was taken from them from European colonization. That's what that plane represents. This is what should have been left behind, the goods in that plane, for them, once all of the Europeans were gone, the colonization. And they have a god. He's a volcanic god. I am not good with pronunciations here, but it's Karaparamon, I think is how it goes. He's basically associated with a now defunct volcano in the area. They had this idea that he's going to come back, drive out all the white people, they'll abandon everything that was their possessions and just leave, and then they will reap the rewards of what was left behind by the people, the payment for the damage done, and they're going to go back to what they want to do. And this cult is pervasive to this day. In the 40s, it got really bad. They had gotten to the point they're like, we have to get rid of all European influence, the money, the education. We're not going to their churches anymore. Screw their schools. They don't really know how the land works around here. We do. We need to go back to what we were. And they went on a spending frenzy in the 40s. I mean, they spent everything that they had. And then they vacated the villages and cities and that were built by the European colonizing, governments and whatnot. the French, basically. The French didn't like that very much because they basically were left with ghost towns and no economy. So they went looking for the heads of this cult who worshipped, who they called Joseph from, is kind of what it translates into. And they are not really sure where they came up with Joseph from. There's a lot of legends behind it, you know, where it could have come from. Too long to discuss that. But basically, the French kicked all of these people out, the leaders that they could find, exiled them away from their homeland, their island, kicked out the leaders of this cult. It didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. They still, to this day, keep doing the cargo bet. They've even built landing strips in remembrance of this. On February 15th of every year, they have Joseph From Day, still. And that's the day he's supposed to show up. At one of these years they celebrate, he's going to land on a landing strip. And then, you know, WASP people like me, we're gone, we'll disappear, we'll run away. I don't know how or why, but we're going to swim across the ocean and leave the island. And whatever we left behind is theirs. And they've got their restitution, and life starts over where it should have been before they were robbed of their freedoms and natural customs. Now, I did want to bring up Prince Philip. I don't know how many follow the royals in London and England. You know, Queen Elizabeth II, her husband, is Prince Philip. He's the Duke of Edinburgh. There's a neighboring island, because it's like a cluster, it's the New Hebrides Islands. They worship him. He is their Joseph From. And the reason why is because their legend of the defunct volcano, because you see different place to different place, oh, well, our God went to a faraway land, married a powerful woman. You see where this is going, right? And then he's going to come back. And wouldn't you know, in 1970s, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Edward came for a visit. There's a man, lots of power, with a powerful woman. Holy cow, it's our Joseph From. He came back. And they still have all of his portraits to this day. That he sent them pictures. They'll send him gifts. He'd take pictures with their gifts as tradition. He is still a big part of this neighboring Tanna Island. So it seems harmless. And in a way, maybe this is okay. It's a little delusional to think they're going to make all the people vacate. But I think you can kind of identify with what they need or what they want here, what they're trying to accomplish. And they're trying to not really hurt anybody in the process. They're just like, we don't want to participate in your style of society and social structures anymore. We want what's back, what is ours. So yeah, it's kind of funny, because you know, you got cargo planes and whatnot. You know, people look at that, they kind of laugh, and then you get to hear the story a little bit. It makes more sense, but it's still kind of like, okay, that still doesn't make sense, but we'll go with it. And then, of course, there's Queen Elizabeth II and, you know, Prince Philip. He would have been probably about 10 or 20 years older when they went to visit. So he was a very strapping, healthy, young, strong man with a strong woman, powerful woman. So that's why he fit the bill. Yes. I don't know how many people know about Jesus people or Jesus freaks. This is a cult of the 60s and 70s. This followed shortly after the 60s hippie, Moonies movement started to decline. They are probably one of the biggest game-changing Christian cults in the American culture. If you grew up in an evangelical household like I did, Pentecostal, anybody? You go to the churches. I think the biggest thing, if you're evangelical, at least for me in Pentecostal, the first memory I have, and it's the most enjoyable, was the music in my church. The rock band, the guitar, you know, they're hitting the drums. There's a lot of folks that love the contemporary Christian music, even after they've left like I did. These guys made that happen. And the reason why is because they brought street music in from the hippies and that when they started doing communes and coordinating in younger youth. They were a very countercultural organization. They didn't like normal regulated churches. They wanted to focus on the love of Christ, but they also wanted to get back to some core values, okay? And they were big advocates of millennialism and restorationism. And millennialism, most of us who have been Christian or still are, you know what that is. It's 1,000 years of peace under Jesus' rule before final judgment. They're big advocates of this. And then they were also big on restorationism, where they wanted to go back and live according to the way the earliest Christians did. And I don't mean like working in fields of stones and all of that, but having a real sense of family, community, and love, and just spreading God's word. And that's where we come with up to the whole always evangelizing. If they're having a conversation with you, they do have an underlying motive. They want you involved because they really, truly, truly want you in God's love. I mean, this is an actual rally, and they're not protesting or anything. This is like a Woodstock for them. And they have these all the time. Okay, and they did have, countercultural adventures with, LSD and whatnot. They kind of tapered away from that as we moved into the 70s and all of that good stuff. Got a lot of the youth in, lots and lots of young youth, because they, like I said, they were countercultural. They didn't agree with the draft. They didn't agree with how tax structures were working. They didn't see a problem if you were married or not. And I know that seems weird because we're talking about restorationism. So how are these people Christian if they're okay with, but they had communal living, just like a lot of the hippies did. They had communes. They lived together and function together and have a big happy family. But they were ultimately charismatic at its core. And before we discuss them, what I mean by charismatic, speaking in tongues, anointing of oil, prophesizing, visions. I think we all know this, being slain in the Holy Spirit. So yeah, they're flopping around or they're waving to the psychedelic music and maybe drugs too as they're listening to whatever. That was the hippie going into Jesus Freaks movement. And they're still around today. So if you go into any evangelical church, the music alone, 100% thanks to the Jesus People movement. 100%. Hands down. They're like the bedrock of evangelism. And I think that's why a lot of the evangelicals today in Christian society, especially with the heated political climate, I think that's why they get offended when we mention cults. And well, you're kind of like a cult. You're kind of obsessive. You don't accept this or that. They don't like that. But the fact is, their roots, a lot of their worship techniques are rooted in a cultish post-hippie movement. And I don't think they even realize it or understand that. Okay, so now we're going to get to the not-so-nice side of cults. And this one for me in particular was always fascinating because of Timothy McVeigh. And we'll go into that in a second here. But this is gods and politics. And I want to stress, just like with the cargo cults, as we noticed, there's politics. There's an ultimate desire to be who they are, their customs, their culture, the society. But it took a lot of politicking to get that where they wanted, Same thing with the Jesus Freak hippie movement. They were countercultural. They fought the draft. They fought a lot of different things. There's still always a lot of politics. And now you're going to see the really destructive side. And this is the covenant, the sword, and the arm of the Lord. They were out of Missouri. For those who aren't familiar, Missouri is usually a very, very ripe garden for all types of extremist religious fringes. Okay, a lot of them have come out of Missouri. So when I hear friends live in Missouri, I'm like, oh man, I'm jealous. Go interview somebody for me, please. They won't do it. They're just like, no. But the covenant, the arm, the sword of the Lord, they started up in the 70s. They were very much an Aryan. I don't want to say they weren't into Nazism or anything like that, but they might as well have been. They're all about racial purity, and Christian purity. And they did a lot of naughty, nasty things. They terrorized a lot of their neighborhoods. They've been known to kidnap people, for political or monetary gain. One of the founders, I believe his name is Wayne Snelling, or no, Ellison. He had killed several cops, reused the same gun, not very smart. Eventually they arrested him. But what's crazy is in 1985, this is right before they crashed into the place. Right before they crashed into this place and raided it, okay? The FBI, seriously, they made these people the second most dangerous terrorist group in America. Not religious terrorist group, not political terrorist group, because that's what they did. They threatened to bomb places. They had done that at abortion clinics as well back in the 80s. A lot of folks, they don't remember this about the abortion fight in the 80s and 90s. It was bloody. It wasn't just people being shot. They had bombs in mailboxes. They had people, being kidnapped and extorted for money. It was craziness. And these guys were part of those. This, to me, is one of the biggest groups that was guilty of that. I took this from ViaWiki because I want to give you the scope of what they raided into. Quite literally, okay? They had obtained over 155 Krugerrands, 1 light anti-tank rocket, 94 long arms. Long arms, if you aren't familiar, okay, that's like rifles. And that includes also World War II era rifles and whatnot, which usually you can buy without any kind of a licensing. You still can to this day, for the most part. That's M1 Garands, that's M41s, that's, all kinds of crazy, crazy weapons. They had 30 handguns, sawed-off shotguns, machine guns, a heavy machine gun, and C4 when they raided in there. It's a wonder those cops came out alive, those agents did. And that's the problem. These guys, the reason they did all of this was because they were sure the end of the world was imminent, which for our logic seems kind of weird because from what I know of, their particular Christian belief, if you're good, you're going anyway. You won't be here for that time of trial. But yet they were stock-armed and ready for that time of trial. And I think ultimately it was because they didn't like the politics. They had a major problem with governmental authority of any kind. They outright tried to say they weren't part of America's government. So ultimately that was their purpose. They wanted to be independent and what they call libertarian, but they were not, okay? But they hid behind religion. They used it and abused it. Yeah, there he is. James Ellison, he was a polygamist, and he committed at least 2 murders. And Richard Wayne Snell was another member of the CSA. And there was a lot of questions about his ties to Timothy McVeigh. Not too far. I just gave a spoiler, I'm sorry. This guy over here, Oklahoma City bombing, I'm sure y'all remember that. Wasn't very nice. Horrible, horrible. Many children and adults died. The problem was they can't completely prove it, but he was applying to the CS of A, okay, at the time that Richard Wayne Snell was arrested finally and put on death row for people he had killed, assisted in killing, the whole 9 yards. And the day that McVeigh committed this crime, which he claims was because of Waco, Ruby Ridge, and there was another one, I forget which one it was. There was like 3 separate incidences that had McVeigh furious, that he said he was going after the government. But he picked the day Richard Wayne Snell was executed. And it was ironic because that was 10 years to the day previously before Snell had been arrested that he had planned to bomb the Murrah building. So it was like, and Snell had even said on the day of his execution, this is not folklore, this is in the record, he had said, something bad's going to happen today on the day I'm killed. And sure enough, there it was. And so they have never been able to completely connect McVeigh, but they do have where he was applying to be a part of that group. He was part of other extremist organizations that were related to CSA. He did know Richard Wayne Snell. It kind of adds up, which is kind of scary. This is politics and cults at work. This is what happens when you mix the two. You've got a passion for what you want to see changed, and you're using religion to hide your governmental avarices of change. Okay, my title's not very nice. That is how many people died, and they were crispy fried in a fire. And there was kids involved too. But they all did so willingly. I thought about talking about Jonestown tonight, but I just don't think we had that kind of time. So maybe we can get someone in that will. So I thought I'll go with Koresh because he's very interesting and charismatic. Koresh moved over to the Texas Branch Davidian Mount Carmel compound in the early 80s. Within 2 years, he had a 16-year-old bride. And then he started, for lack of a better word, he was shagging the much older prophetess that was running the Branch Davidians at that time. Another member was jealous of this, felt he was using her to gain power, and ultimately they kicked Koresh out of the Branch Davidians. The struggle continued for at least 4 more years. He finally said, okay, let's settle this once and for all, because the prophetess had died, and they were up in the air about who was going to run the show. And Koresh had heard about it. And it was the same guy who had thrown out before that was wanting to go into power, and he's like, this isn't cool. We're going to settle this once and for all. Koresh said, let's have a pray-off over her body. We're going to have a resurrection contest. So they had her corpse, and for the first 3 days, his opposition had a chance, or no, he was first. He got to pray for 3 days to try and resurrect her. And if he did, he was the new leader. Didn't happen. We all know what happens. The only way she's going to raise up is with a body spasm, and then she's going to probably lay back down again, rigor mortis and all that. But it's true. Did I mention I wanted to be a mortician at one point? Yeah. So he failed, and it was this next guy's turn. Now you're thinking, this is stupid. We know nobody's going to be raised from the dead in this, so how's this going to settle this argument once and for all and decide who's going to lead the Branch Davidians? Who's going to be in control of the flock? He's not as stupid as he looks, like most cult leaders are not. When his competition went in there to pray for her for 3 days, he and his buddies first called the police to tell them he was praying over a corpse, which in Texas is abuse of a corpse. He was going to go illegal means to get this guy removed. But on top of that, they went in to try and kill this guy. Fortunately, the guy only took one shot, and I think it was in the shoulder or something. He survived. But the guy, he wasn't arrested because they all said it was self-defense. The cops bought it because, I mean, look, this dude's praying over a corpse, and this is weird, you know. They totally took Koresh's side and took the guy out, and Koresh went into power. And from there, it went downhill. Drugs, power, like always. He would use excuses for smoking. Well, the Bible says and smoke came from his nose when they were talking about Yahweh in the Old Testament, which was a volcano god at that point. He used all kinds of manners to change things. But at the same time, he was abusing women, abusing children, as we all know, unfortunately, in a lot of these big groups. We see that with Jeff Warren. And it ultimately led to, much like our previous fellows with the CSA, they were hoarding weapons, and they had a compound because they were preparing for the end of time again. They didn't want to be on planet Earth anymore. For whatever reason, that's one of the biggest things I see with cults. They are disenchanted with being human. Something's wrong with just being human. So ultimately, we all remember Miss Reno. They needed to get in there because they know one, girls were being abused and married, and they obviously had illegal firearms. And I think we all remember that from the 90s. I believe it was it 93? I think it was a raid. It was 93. And they went in. It was a firestorm. I think that siege took like, what, 4 or 5 hours before everybody was dead and engulfed in flames. And unfortunately, unlike Jonestown, we don't have a recording to hear the mentality. But it's pretty much a given they weren't being forced to stay in that building with the amount of gunfire that had exited that building. Everybody and their mother was firing away at the police to keep them out. They were that programmed and determined to have their version of reality. And that's, unfortunately, really the only way to escape a cult usually, that's an extreme cult. It usually ends up in death unless you can get that person to come around on their own. It's almost as bad as alcoholism and drug abuse. They just do not see the reality. And that's our brief overview of cults. I'll wrap it up because I think we got like 4 minutes left. I could go on how to escape one, but I think I pretty much just explained it. Same thing happened with Jonestown. Heaven's Gate, same way. You don't really escape one unless you're made aware. And sometimes that involves you being kidnapped by your own parents and reprogrammed, which doesn't always take because it was against your will to begin with.
Yes, I understand that my whole life is just a blink of an eye. The history of the earth is with each moment that goes by. But this moment that I'm with you, it feels like time has stood still. It feels somehow like it matters, and that it always will. Thank you so much.